As you may know, Blaziken is one of the 3-star Pokémon introduced in the 3rd generation. If you had a copy of Ruby, Sapphire, or Emerald, you'd probably beat the game with it. Or if you were like me and didn't have any of those games, you'd spam the Pokémon Colosseum battle mode and reset until you got the rental team which had it, just because you watched Blaziken beat Ash's Charizard in the anime. But we aren't here to talk about that. Blaziken is famous for many things, but something that you probably didn't know is that in Pokémon Black and White, Blaziken made history, as it was the first starter Pokémon strong enough to be banned in singles play. That's right, Blaziken was the first starter Pokémon to be deemed powerful enough to be sent to the Overtier, the tier where you would find mostly banned legendary Pokémon such as Kyogre, Groudon, and Arceus. But what if I told you that in this metagame Blaziken would not only be viable, but would eventually become one of the best Pokémon in the tier, and one that defines the meta? In this video we touch upon one of the most interesting cases in competitive Pokémon history, that being the rise of Blaziken. In Pokémon Black and White, several Pokémon got access to hidden abilities thanks to the generation's exclusive game content, the Dream World. While I won't go into what exactly this is, in it you'd get access to special Pokémon with exclusive abilities, such as Dragonite with Multiscale, Salamence with Moxie, and Brilliant with Technician. In Blaziken's case, its hidden ability was Speed Boost, an ability that was previously exclusive to Bug-type Pokémon such as Yanma, Yanmega, and Ninjask. This would mean that Blaziken, a Pokémon with already high offensive stats, would receive the only thing it was missing, speed. And on March 27, 2011, it would be banned from OU and welcomed into the Overtier, making it the first star Pokémon to ever cross that line. But how functional was Blaziken in a tier where the population consisted mainly of legendary and mythical Pokémon? Well, to put it bluntly, for many years Blaziken was considered mid. It was a Pokémon you'd only use to flex and wasn't really seen as something you'd bring to games with high stakes. Blaziken had a few positive things going for it. For example, it synergized well with Groudon Sun and other Pokémon like Ho-Oh. But despite having a base 120 attack stat, access to Swords Dance, as well as Speed Boost, not to mention moves like Flare Blitz and High Jump Kick, Blaziken wouldn't be able to do much against Uber's bulkier Pokémon, such as Giratina and Arceus Ghost in Rain. Since gens were not experimented upon until much later, for many years players thought Life Orb was the best item choice. Paired with moves like Flare Blitz and High Jump Kick, this gave the impression that Blaziken was not a durable mon, or rather it functioned as one that would get 1 or 2 KOs and then had to get ready to pack its bags. Furthermore, Blaziken's lack of immediate speed and fragile defensive stats put it in a spot where it was easy to check offensively as well. Adamant Blaziken would hit a mere 388 speed after 1 turn of Speed Boost, making it slower than prominent Pokémon like Mewtwo, Choice Scarf Kyogre, Palkia, and Dialga. Running a Jolly nature was not acceptable either since it was considered weak. You would essentially be trading one negative trait for another. This led to Blaziken to not see much usage in tournament play for more than 12 years. Fast forward to July 2023 and we see the first hint of what we would call the Blaziken Renaissance, or if you want to be cool about it, the Blaziken Renaissance, but more on that later. The team you see being used by user Kebe will later become one of the most emblematic teams in the meta, however we are not at that point yet. It wasn't until early 2024 when people started experimenting with Blaziken, more notably the set of Ghost Gen Shadow Claw started seeing more usage. This was a set used in some instances in the past, but it wasn't really seeing optimization until now. An Adamant +2 Shadow Claw boosted by Ghost Gem would easily be able to handle the sturdiest of Ghost types with little chip damage from hazards, eliminating a weakness it previously had. Not only that, but Low Kick was the only stab move it needed, replacing Flare Blitz and High Jump Kick. Because most legendaries are heavy enough, Low Kick's base power against them is commonly 120, making it as strong as moves like Close Combat without any backlash from using it. It also wouldn't receive any recoil damage from a move like Flare Blitz or lose half of its HP if a move like High Jump Kick missed. More importantly, Adamant Blaziken's Low Kick was strong enough to do massive damage to the main legendaries. Fighting Stab is not common in Gen 5 Ubers, but it is actually one of the nicest ones to have. Blaziken would be able to potentially OHKO Pokémon like Dialga, Normal Arceus, and Darkrai with little effort or minimal chip. With a consistent attack move combination in the form of Ghost Fighting, Blaziken started seeing usage little by little. Players were even exploring combinations you wouldn't dream of seeing in years prior, such as a rain offense with Blaziken. Blaziken started being more than just a sweeper. Thanks to the speed it would get from its ability, it could potentially revenge kill many Pokémon if set up properly. Protect would also allow it to scout for potentially choice Pokémon and allow the player to switch out accordingly. Blaziken went from being a bad sweeper to a strong breaker, an improved choice scarf user, and a way to scout the opponent, all at the same time. Late 2024 would mark the beginning of the Blaziken Renaissance, and the metagame as people knew it would change forever. In early 2025, Blaziken would be continuing to rise as a staple for many offensive teams. By the end of the first Ubers tournament of the year, Blaziken would see a spike in the usage statistics, ending in the number 9 spot alongside other Pokémon. The Blaziken Renaissance was in full bloom. By this point, Blaziken wasn't simply a trend, it was a newly discovered force of nature, not a flex mod, but a legitimate threat which couldn't be ignored. But what exactly changed? What made Blaziken go from a nobody to uber shiny's new toy? We already talked about Blaziken alone, and how players rediscovered its positive attributes, but now we have to talk about how the metagame landscape was shaped prior to that in order to understand why Blaziken essentially became unavoidable. At its core, Gen 5 Ubers was mostly dominated by spike stacking hyper-offense teams, with Deoxys speed being the cornerstone of this archetype. In the past era, there was room for balanced and bulky teams, but you wouldn't use them often unless you had enough experience and meta knowledge to pilot them. This would lead players to completely dismiss Pokémon like Blaziken, who in theory needed a few turns to get the ball rolling and were easily carried by any strong hit with hazard support. Not to mention Pokémon like Sword Dance, Extreme Speed Arceus Normal, aka Extreme Killer Arceus, and Chesney, Giratina, Origin were always present in this metagame. However, as consistent as lead spiker teams were, they had an awful matchup against a very particular team, this being Espeon Sun, more commonly known as Magic Sun. Hoenn and Magic Sun deserve a separate video entirely, but in order to keep ourselves on topic, I will try to summarize it to the best of my ability. Magic Sun is an offense archetype centered around Ho-Oh, who, with the assistance of Pokémon with the ability Magic Bounce, such as Espeon or Satu, aims to delay Stealth Rock being set up against it, thus allowing Ho-Oh to either wall most of the metagame with defensive sets, or get as many KOs as possible with Choice Band, Brave Bird, and Sacred Fire, among other offensive sets. It goes without saying that the intrusion of Espeon or Satu would stop Pokémon like Deoxys and Lead Fortress from setting off Spikes or Stealth Rock. While these aren't the bulkiest Pokémon, their purpose was to last long enough so if hazards were eventually set up against you, it wouldn't matter or the win was already secured. However, this archetype was considered hit or miss. Magic Sun is an archetype as old as time, and the team I mentioned earlier is technically not new, but it wasn't truly optimized until recently. Turns out Blaziken was the missing piece Magic Sun needed in order to become a truly consistent team. Blaziken's role in Magic Sun is not that of a late game sweeper in most scenarios. If anything, Blaziken acts more as a mid game breaker and one that takes advantage of passive Pokémon, allowing it to set up a potentially snowball quickly, as well as clearing the path for the true late game cleaner, Extreme Killer Arceus. All Blaziken needs to do is switch into a Pokémon like Ferrothorn or Fortress, who commonly try to set up hazards as soon as possible and use them as setup fodder. Given the chance, it can set up Sword Dance on them and potentially get 1 or 2 KOs depending on what the opponent has in the back. Not only that, but Blaziken is also able to take advantage of 2 of the most common choice Pokémon in the tier, Genesect and Kyogre. Blaziken can come in after Kyogre has used Ice Beam and scout whether it is choice or not with the help of Protect, or even set up Sword Dance on it if such is already confirmed. It can also keep Genesect immediate backlash by setting up on choice Ironhead or U-turn. At the same time, Trick Choice Scarf Espeon would enable Blaziken, Ho-Oh, and Arceus and allow them to set up against bulky Pokémon, or in Ho-Oh's case, wall Pokémon more easily. This is Blaziken at its best, not as a standalone sweeper but as a breaker which provides offensive support for walls such as Ho-Oh and late game cleaners like Extreme Killer Arceus. Given how consistent this team composition is, players started to deviate from lead spikers and lean towards teams that had more immediate offense or bulkier teams that were able to handle the onslaught that came from facing Blaziken plus a second physical sweeper. Eventually, Blaziken Magic Sun became as popular as any archetype before it, which would put lead spiker teams in jeopardy. Facing Magic Sun while using a lead spiker would essentially put you at a disadvantage, and thus leads like Deoxys and Fortress start seeing less usage overall. Because of the absence of fast spikes, the metagame was reinvented and we started to see new, never seen before team ideas that wouldn't be able to come to light in a metagame where fast hazards acted as a true deal breaker for certain archetypes. After a while, and because of the success of the many offensive teams that had it, Blaziken became a metagame defining Pokémon, something that in some way dictated how teams were now built. To put it bluntly, if your team couldn't find a practical way to check Blaziken while also avoid losing to a different physical sweeper like Groudon or Arceus, your team was not viable. Ignoring Blaziken was not considered a team building flaw. Knowing all of this, we can't really ignore the recurring weaknesses that come with Blaziken. It's still a fragile Pokémon, and it still needs to use Protect sometimes in order to properly operate. This has led Blaziken to become a somewhat linear mon and thus easily accounted for in battle. Furthermore, Pokémon like Gliscor and Rain and physically defensive Ho-Oh can easily take a hit from Blaziken Shadow Claw, low K Cold Flare rates at +2, and KO back with Earthquake and Brave Bird respectively. Past offensive checks are also still true and tested. Arceus and Rayquaza get access to Extreme Speed, and with Little Chip they can easily KO Blaziken as well. Not to mention that against fast Pokémon, Blaziken sometimes needs to double Protect in order to outspeed, relying on odds to get the job done. For example, Timid Max with Mewtwo Zero speeds Adamant Blaziken at +1 speed. The goal of any team should be to create scenarios where Blaziken can set up, or if it can't set up, have something in the back that is able to survive a +2 hit and KO back. Of course, nothing is set in stone. Shadow Claw has a high critical ratio, and critical hits still deal double damage in black and white. A timely crit even against the best counters can result in checkmate in Blaziken's favor altogether. Not to mention that as time goes on, sets and teams can adapt to their needs. For example, there's been a recent rise on lead Toxic Spikes and Aqua offenses that use Fire Gem Flare Blitz Blaziken as a breaker. The additional 12.5% taken from Poison paired with Protect can maximize Blaziken's use of it, as well as moving the damage roll further in its favor. Fire Gem Flare Blitz in Sun can also facilitate KOs even against Resist or otherwise counters such as Gliscor. There is no doubt that the metagame will keep evolving, and only time will tell if Blaziken will be as effective as it is right now in the future or not. But at the very least, we can't deny that right now it's just as important as any other top Pokémon. Black and White Ubers is one of the most varied metas of its kind, and one of the least centralizing ones. It's one of the few Ubers metagames where you won't find a clear answer to who the number one Pokémon is, which is why Blaziken, being a starter Pokémon with a much lower base stat total than most of the other mons in the tier, and having this much of an impact in the meta is all the more interesting. After the Ubers Premier League 2025, the biggest Ubers tournament of the year, Blaziken sits at number 12 in the usage statistics, a few spots down from earlier this year. Nevertheless, it's still very impressive considering the spot it was in a few years ago. We can't deny that Blaziken proves that base stats aren't everything. It has shown that misconceptions in Pokémon can often lead to the dismissal of potentially good Pokémon for years, while also being a testament that with genuine curiosity we might find hidden gems that we didn't think of before, even years later. Blaziken wouldn't be the last starter to make it to Ubers though. Greninja would be able to get there in Generation 6, and Cinderace would also join the club in Generation 8. However, neither would be as viable in their respective gens as Blaziken can release in Generation 5 Ubers. We also have to mention that Black and White is the last generation without any form of generational mechanic or extensive power crit though, so it can be too hard on the other two for not pulling their weight. I for one am excited to see how Blaziken will hold up in the future, and how the metagame adapts even further. What do you think? Do you think we'll ever get another starter like Blaziken in the future? Let me know in the comments below. As always, many thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.